everyone. My name is Dr. Kenya Hamid, and I'm a neuropsychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. During the coronavirus crisis, our telehealth resources include diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, 30-minute phone consultations, bereavement and grief support, remote neuropsychological evaluations, and that's just a sampling. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. Today, I'd like to talk about strategies to help young learners rebound from a disrupted school year and answer your questions about that and anything else you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed, and we'll also post some links to helpful resources on childmind.org. Remember, we're here every day and we look through your questions daily. All right, everyone, let's just kind of get to it. We've already have questions that have been rolling in on this topic. And so our first question comes from Kim, and she wants to know, what can I do to help my son stay engaged with learning until he's able to be back in school? So one of the first things that I would really highly recommend that we've put together at the Child Mind Institute is a guide that's called the Family Resources for Remote Learning, and you can find it online on childmind.org under guides. So when we're thinking about kids staying engaged with learning, one of the big pivotal subjects that we want to make sure that they're continuing to work on is just reading and those early literacy skills. So books is something that I think would be very valuable during this time. So for our young readers, and once again, I mentioned on that guide that's on cmi.org or childmind.org that you can find, it lists a whole bunch of books that we would recommend for reading to kids. As well as reading books, they can also benefit too from just listening to stories on audio. That can be helpful both of those ways in increasing a child's vocabulary and comprehension skills. Now, for our kids that are a little bit older and, they've kind of are continuing to work on some of those just basic reading skills in place, what you can also start to target too are just like reading fluency abilities. And so here, picking books that children are already able to read independently can be very helpful, and then reading them together. So what we would have you do is have the parent or caregiver read the story, and then the child also reads out loud. And this would give them extra kind of support and know-how on the pacing for kind of what reading fluently looks like. In addition, as kids continue to foster and develop their reading skills, our next emphasis is on reading comprehension, right? So do they fully understand kind of what exactly is it that they're reading? And so in tackling this, there's multiple options. You can either do this together by reading together and then coming up with questions kind of throughout the story, focusing on, what the main idea of it was, who were the characters, as well as, having the child come up with adjectives to describe the character, as well as then starting to make like inferences on like, what do you think is going to happen next, for stories that they're not already familiar with. For some of our older kids, you might even want to, give them kind of book report assignments where, this way that they can kind of independently read and then have specified questions that, you'd want them to answer. Also included in that resource guide, there are a number of just kind of what we have like educational games for kids, as well as worksheets, printable worksheets, um, in both kind of math and reading, spelling skills, focusing on grammar and punctuation. So this way, I mean, you're really having the opportunity to um, spend time focusing on kind of all of those fundamental learning skills for kids, as well as for kids that are kind of within the age of beginning to learn how to write. There are also plenty of options there too to focus on writing skills. And when it comes to math, similarly, there are just kind of beginning books that focus on kind of those early math skills, as well as so many just kind of printable worksheets, um, activity booklets that you can buy to help the kids continuing to practice those math skills. And even besides all of those kind of resources that are available, I think, um, you know, at home opportunities, there can be so many of them where you're bringing in math skills and you're incorporating math to lessons in cooking, having kids help bake things with you. I mean, you can kind of pose math questions through there, as well as even just kind of playing games together, keeping score, counting, um, flashcards. There are so many kind of creative ways outside of just maybe traditional educational experiences or resources in which you can just kind of continue to incorporate learning um, outside of kind of that formal instruction that kids are just accustomed to. Um, so we've got a question from Alyssa who wants to know, are doll are dolls and imaginative play with said dolls beneficial to children? I know it was for me, but I wonder if it is overall in your opinion. I would definitely say so. Kids learn through play, and when you playing with dolls, or this could be Legos and action figures, just those types of toys, it helps kids to continually kind of like recreate everyday scenarios, social situations. It's kind of a way for them to kind of practice those things outside of the actual setting. And so that's where I think it can be very, very, very kind of helpful. And just too, when we think about imaginative play, we're talking about just kind of expanding a child's mindset on things, incorporating new possibilities. I mean, these are all kind of ways to help teach kids, um, and it's also just kind of really fun, which is why so many children kind of learn through play, right? They're just natural explorers. So yes, I would definitely agree that that's a definitely good thing to want to keep doing. Okay, so now we're going to take a 30-second break to learn more about telehealth at the Child Mind Institute, and we'll be right back answering more of your questions.
The Child Mind Institute is a national leader in children's mental health and learning disorders. In the face of the coronavirus pandemic, we are here to support all families. Whether you need help with remote learning, stress management techniques, or support for children who are in distress, the Child Mind Institute is available to help your family cope during this challenging time. We're here for you wherever you are. To request an appointment, visit childmind.org/telehealth.
All right, everyone. Um, I'm Dr. Hamid, and we are back. And so today we are talking about strategies to help young learners rebound from a disrupted school year. Before we get back into your questions, I just want you to know that if you'd like to make a telehealth appointment, just call 877-203-3452 anytime during this video. An intake coordinator is standing by to help. You can also make an appointment through our website at childmind.org/telehealth. You'll find a link in the comments below. All right, so our next question comes from Michelle. She says, my daughter's preschool is having Zoom classes. She seems to like them, but they just feel like extra screen time to me. We're paying for these as if she were an actual daycare, and I'm inclined to stop. What is she getting from this? Am I missing something? Very good question, Michelle. So one of the first points that I want to touch on is, I guess screen time in and of itself is not inherently bad, but um, there are kind of two pieces that are missing oftentimes when a child is just using a screen. One would be that social interaction piece, right? You've got content or characters on the TV that may be interacting with each other, but nobody's actually directly interacting with your child, and your child is not actively interacting with the TV. And then there's that language piece, right? So it's just the conversations that go on through the screen, but once again, because nobody's interacting with your child, that language piece is missing as well. Now, that is just with a typical screen time TV show, but if your child is receiving kind of these preschool classes on Zoom, now, of course, I don't know exactly what they're doing there. My thought would be is that it's going to be a little bit different. So two of those kind of concerns that researchers have, and that's been pointed out in the literature as far as screen time and kind of what can make it so problematic, is not as much of a concern because you've got a teacher that is actively responding to your child and changing how they behave, what they say, what they do, based on kind of how your child engages and interacts, kind of through that platform. So these could be things such as mimicking your child's affect. That's not going to be something that you're going to get from a traditional TV show program compared to another live person on the other end of the screen, as well as too just kind of repeating a child's words, helping to build that vocabulary. Your child says a word, and then the teacher says, "Oh, yes," and then kind of builds on it, kind of repeats it. So it becomes a much more active way of learning compared to with screen time. It can be much more just kind of passive learning in that sense. And so I think from that standpoint, that would be the benefit, as well as for your child and your child's teacher. By being on these Zoom calls, you're helping to kind of just maintain the relationship that has already been built in school, in that school or daycare type of a setting. So kind of with that being said, I think that's kind of what your child could potentially be getting from this. But I also realize that in no way is it comparable to actual daycare in and of itself, because still the parent or caregiver is entirely responsible for kind of managing the child and kind of all of those similar expectations and duties that a parent would expect when a child goes to daycare um, is not there anymore. So I guess it's just kind of weighing those pros and cons if you really feel like this is worth it, or you know, or stopping it. So we have another question. So Jennifer wants to know, how many hours a day do you think is too much screen time learning? I think my daughter is getting too many hours of online classes. Well, I think first I would say a lot of this is probably going to depend on how old your child is, Jennifer. So some things that come to mind is exactly kind of what the screen time learning looks like if we're just showing your child videos versus an actual maybe back and forth potential discussion. I think those could be two completely different things, and maybe I would weigh them a little bit differently. As well as I would also want to know why you think your child is getting too many hours of online classes. They just kind of showing a general fatigue, which sometimes we know is what happens just from staring at screens for so long, as well as just kind of what that benefit might be. So I think, in just a very general sense, younger kids are going to need a lot less screen time than potentially older kids. But some of this is going to likely depend on just how much you think your child can handle. And I feel like if potentially you are starting to have those concerns, and you mentioned that your child is 12, okay, got that, thank you. Then if there are options to scale back, then maybe that might be the right call. But I know that all kind of schools and the learning is just really very variable. And so I think that this can kind of be a hard question to answer. I feel like if you have additional concerns, it might be worth speaking with your child's teacher about this, as well as if you're interested in kind of more so talking to a professional about just kind of your individualized concerns. Of course, you can always give us a call as well. And we do phone consultations. We've got another question that asks, how can I help my daughter who suffers from social anxiety and SPD to manage Zoom calls with her class? She is very scared and doesn't want to do them. Oh. So I think that now Zoom is kind of the new normal, and so I think avoidance is probably not going to be the best strategy at this point in time, because we just kind of know that we've got to start to push through them. But gradual exposure might be helpful. So I don't know if you guys have already tried um, starting these Zoom calls and then turning her camera off. That way, she can kind of just get a feel for how the online environment is, so that, she can just be that passive observer. And then maybe as over time, with the class, she maybe turns her camera on, but maybe mutes the mic. There are also options of typing within the chat box if you have questions, rather than kind of feeling that uncomfortable dance of interrupting and then stopping. I know sometimes too, there's so much of that social aspect that you can miss, by doing video calls versus in person actual interactions. So those might basic ways of just kind of gradually helping to expose her to getting more comfortable with Zoom calls. But I think that that's definitely something that we would want the goal to be, as well as if her teacher has any sort of additional, can provide any sort of additional support to her, just kind of knowing how uncomfortable she feels, making sure that maybe she's not being directly called on. Now you had mentioned too, okay, so you said you did start with the camera and the microphone off. Then she refused because she says it's too much noise. Now, I don't know, I'm thinking just adjusting the volume on there, but then it could also just be maybe a little bit more of an engaging and a rambunctious type of a classroom. I would definitely suggest, if you're having a lot of difficulty just getting her to be able to kind of sit there and participate, you may want to kind of seek more individualized professional help and support. And CMI is kind of standing by, waiting to talk and help families along the way. So just kind of keep us in mind with that. And once again, I think it could also be helpful to just kind of reach out to the teacher. I'm not sure if the noise level that she's hearing might be due to because she's wearing headphones and it's just kind of uncomfortable, or if she's had any of these sort of concerns typically in the classroom setting. Those can make big differences as far as kind of how to handle things. We've also got another question from Charlotte, who says, my child seems to be really struggling with his emotions and being able to express himself. I think it's due to the lockdown. He is due to start year in September, and I'm really worried about his confidence starting and behavior. Could you please give any advice? He's due to start. What is he due to start in September? That part I'm not 100% sure. Oh, year R. Oh, I'm not familiar with what year R is. That must be a different system. But maybe this might be kindergarten or first grade or something like that. I'm just gonna go on a wild guess right now. But I think when it comes to talking to kids about their emotions, sometimes kids just don't necessarily have the language skills to kind of put such complex feelings into words. And so what can be helpful is maybe her first year in school. Thank you, Charlotte. Finding other means like drawing, that can be really helpful. Asking kids to draw how you feel, as well as you as a parent helping to label emotions yourself. So you get upset and you make sure to say, like, I'm feeling really upset right now, or mommy's feeling really sad right now, just kind of in general as a general practice. Because if you think about it, adults are going to be much better at discussing emotions. One is because we just kind of had the life experience and this kind of the inherent practice of doing so. But for kids, it just definitely doesn't come as natural. So being able to label those emotions for your child can be very helpful. Even coming up with like putting together flashcards where a child can then just pick, if she's able to read at this point, or if you don't write them down, maybe you can print out different like emoticons, smiley face, sad face, and then even there that can start to kind of open up the kind of communication breakdowns to start to talk about how she's feeling, right? I see you pointing to the sad face. Why are you so sad today? And then giving kids a moment to see if they can kind of gather the thoughts to explain. And then if not, maybe throwing out potential options. Is it because of what happened, before lunch? So you're kind of essentially leading this trail of breadcrumbs for kids to kind of piggyback off of, and then help to expand just kind of their vocabulary, their sense of their just kind of emotional. So I hope that was helpful. We've also got another question from Lynn, who says, my son only displays aggression and shuts down in school. I have yet to find meds or proper therapy. He has ADHD, anxiety, learning disabilities. I believe he is misdiagnosed, struggling with what type of doctor I should be looking for him. Okay. So, question, Lynn. You are looking at the right kind of doctor for him. So I think a neuropsychologist, which I am, would be somebody that could be very helpful. Essentially what we do is we make that connection between the brain and all the different thinking processes. Okay, and you're mentioning he's 15 and has been struggling in school since 5th grade. So between the brain and then the behavior, right? So how does his social, emotional well-being, his IQ, his academic skills, his memory, his learning, how does that all impact kind of the behaviors that we see on a day-to-day basis? A neuropsychologist considers kind of all aspects of a child, both in the school environment as well as outside of the school environment, has a comprehensive understanding of both kind of learning issues as well as neurodevelopmental disorders, like for instance, learning disorders, things like ADHD, emotional disorders like anxiety. So I think that you finding a neuropsychologist could be very helpful in this case of getting a much more overarching picture of what these problems are, as well as to aid for learning your child's, as well as diagnoses and clarifying what those diagnoses are and how much of ADHD is playing into the academic problems versus how much of this is the learning disorders. These are all things that we can tease out. And then in the end, us providing valuable recommendations, both within the school setting. I'm not sure if your child is receiving any sort of specialized supportive services to help with any of the learning problems or the behavior problems, both in the school setting as well as outside, which could include, helping you find other, practitioners, psychiatrists, management, as well as kind of therapists to provide kind of ongoing kind of both cognitive and behavioral management and discussion. So, whoa, that was a mouthful. And I hope that was helpful. So just as we're wrapping up, I just want to thank you guys all again for joining me. I hope it was helpful. And remember, we're here every day and we look through your questions daily. The Child Mind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more about the incredible variety of remote telehealth resources we have available during this time for children, teens, and young adults. Be safe, and thank you.